Good evening, everybody. I'll start with some quick introductions. My name is Brian Smith. I am the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning here in Mehlville. And obviously, I appreciate you all joining us for this Mehlville at Home session. Our purpose is to be able to provide some information about what online learning opportunities we will have available in the district come next year. I'll be starting my screen pretty shortly here, sharing my screen pretty shortly here, but just kind of a couple of housekeeping matters. If you have a QR code reading app on your cell phone, that may come in very handy at the end because we will ask you just to complete a very short form related to your interest, continued interest potentially, in online learning. I know some of you are here because you just have an interest in it and you want to learn more. Others of you might be here because you've made that decision that the district's going to offer that, and that's what we're going to do. And both of those are perfectly fine. We want to make sure that we're being transparent. We want to make sure that we're being informative. So in just a moment, I'm going to share my screen to take you through about an 8-slide presentation. While this is an elementary call, we will have a couple of slides that will also refer to middle school and high school. I have a middle school call at 7 and a high school call at 8 o'clock tonight. So I built them all into the same presentation. So if you are by chance an elementary parent who also has either a middle school kid and or a high school kid, we won't delve as much into the formats of the middle school or the high school, but I'll kind of glaze over that piece just a little bit. We'll spend more time talking specifically about elementary, but I want to make sure that you have all the information that you could need to be able to make the most informed decision that you could possibly make. So I'm going to share my screen here. And before I get too far into this, I also want to say thank you to both Hunter Robinson as well as Jessica Papillo. Jess is our Director of Communications and Hunter is our Communications Specialist. And so they're helping me tonight to make sure that you can get all the information that you need, and they're kind of working behind the scenes. So I do want to make sure I take a moment to thank them. And I do also see that we have some members from the curriculum team. I see Sadie Lewis, John DeWally. I think I saw a few others as well. You know, when you have like 7 screens full of stuff, I apologize to any of my curriculum team members if by chance I didn't get a chance to shout out your name. So they've all been doing a great amount of work to try to make sure that we're getting ready for the school year in whatever way or form that it's going to look. So let me share my screen with you and put this into presentation mode. Sorry, there's transition. Looking just for my play button. I don't usually do this. All right.
Click the down arrow over in the far right-hand side of the toolbar.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's what I was missing. And it was hidden too. So, sorry, wrong one. There we go. All right, so again, tonight is about Mehlville at Home, our online learning presentation. So first and foremost, we will be monitoring the questions in the chat section. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask that you may get prompted by, or you may spark some things that come up, I would encourage you to use that chat piece. In Zoom, you'll find it typically at the bottom. Usually it just says chat. So that'll open up a chat window and you can type your questions in there. We will be monitoring those, and Mrs. Papillo will be kind of moderating some of that discussion afterwards. Sometimes when you're trying to drive through a presentation and monitor the chat, I tend to get a little off track. So I want to make sure that we stay focused on this particular piece. We will be developing a FAQ, a frequently asked questions piece as well, and sharing that at a later time. But we'll do our best to try to get through all of the questions that you may have tonight. Again, the presentation is only about 8 slides. We wanted to try to make sure we left time for questions that would be more specific and more detailed than maybe what a presentation could do. So to begin, we look at what is Mehlville at Home. Mehlville at Home is a concept that we had been planning for, was in the planning stages. And as COVID-19 came to be in March, for us at the district level, it accelerated our timelines. So while this wasn't solely in response to it, because we had been planning a piece of this, we weren't that far into the planning piece, to be honest with you. And so this really accelerated our timeline to be able to say, we're going to need to be able to do something for families that want to be able to access this. So it is a choice for online instruction. And later we can talk, well, is it 100% online? Will there be opportunities for a level of blended? Is this mandatory? Is it optional? Those are certainly questions that will come up. And the one piece that we are currently asking is that any district student can enroll from the kindergarten through 12th grade level. What we're asking for is just a 1 semester at a time commitment. It's hard to be able to, if you're a student, to bounce in for 3 weeks and then go back to school for 5 and then try to bounce back in here for 9. So we're asking for just 1 semester at a time. And again, this is the optional piece. These are for students who want to experience this online option. For the most part, 100% of the time. We'll talk about some of those details pretty soon. To talk about why it was created, I mentioned a little bit about this, that we had already been in the planning process, but we were planning on this because the district recognizes that there are a variety of needs that our students and families have. Sometimes you may have an immunocompromised child. Sometimes you may have schedules that don't always work well with a school schedule. Sometimes there's just other needs that families or students may have that maybe a traditional in-class physical environment may not always provide. So what that gives us an opportunity to be able to do is to personalize that experience. And if we learn nothing more from what happened from March to May, that is that the need for a personalized experience for every child is critically important. And those pieces will continue to be planned for by the district. And I do think that you will see more of that in our strategic planning in the upcoming years. We also do recognize that there may be some families who decide not to send their student back due to concerns about COVID-19. And those are perfectly acceptable, reasonable, and that is a piece that is a family decision. But a school district's job is to try to figure out how to be able to support every single student and every single family. So some of the basics with regards to elementary, so what will kids learn? And so at the elementary level, when I was going through and creating this presentation, part of what I used was a report card. So when you take a look at a report card at the kindergarten through 5th grade levels, you're going to find basically 7 or 8 pieces to that report card. And I say pieces, what I really mean are content pieces. So for example, English language arts, which is reading and writing, math, science, social studies, as well as music, PE, and art. We also, on report cards, we have things that are called portrait of graduates. And these are characteristics that we want kids to be able to have, especially they are at kind of a K-12 goal that we have for kids. But the content area are pieces that we know that we need to offer. We also know that we have state requirements that we have to be able to offer. And so you can see, our plans are right now to be able to have a section or potentially more of kindergarten and 1st grade, a section or potentially more of 2nd and 3rd grade, and a section or more of 4th and 5th grade. So these are combined classrooms. DESE, which is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, guidelines allow us to be able to enroll students from 2 consecutive grade levels. And so while we won't have a separate kindergarten and a separate 1st and a separate 2nd, so on and so forth, this is going to be an opportunity for some grade grade continuation or some grade bands rather than just the individual grade levels. The piece about music, PE, and art, currently unlike the piece that's English, math, science, and social studies, we are still working on planning. We're getting ready to enter July, but we're working on some of the final pieces of this plan at the elementary level to try to determine if it's going to be taught by a Mehlville certified teacher, certified in music or PE or art, as well as, or maybe even in addition to, a platform that may require that. It may not be both. It's likely to be either this or that. Launch or Edgenuity are pieces where they can be asynchronous one way or sometimes synchronous two-way pieces, which would be the way we would do it too. We are simply working through some of the final pieces. Numbers do drive some of these decisions. So if we only had 5 kids that were interested, it would be committing a lot of resources for 5 kids. Whereas if we had 250 kids, committing to a program, then that maybe helps us look at our structure a little bit differently. So we are going to, we're going to move forward with that. And those grade bands, I think, are an important piece of that. So that way you understand it would be with K and 1, or with 2 and 3, or with 4 and 5. You can see at the middle school level, for those that have middle school students, and I told you I would glaze through this particular piece. At the middle school level, you can see they'll have access to at least a couple of Mehlville School District teachers in a synchronous environment, two-way back and forth in a virtual manner. That's where we're at right now, depending again on the potential of kids that may go into this program. These opportunities may expand even more. So you can see all of the other things that are also on report cards, like science, math, career education, health, PE, art, music, and the exploratory classes. Those, again, would be very similar to some of those exploratory classes we have at the elementary. We're working through, it's either going to be through a Mehlville certified teacher or through another outside platform. And again, at the high school level, we focus on graduation requirements there. The requirements do look a bit different in terms of the subjects, but again, we will be looking at, it's either through a Mehlville certified teacher or through another platforms, again, such as Launch or Edgenuity. So I told you I would glaze over those 2 pieces at this particular point in time. So I know a question that some folks may have would be, how does Mehlville at Home compare to an in-person school? And regarding an in-person school, whatever that may mean now, because we know the context of that may be a little different. It's maybe a new normal if you want to look at it as such. We still want to have an engaging student experience. This would certainly have an embedded technology usage since it is virtual, up to 100% virtual. So there will be some tools that kids would be using. Some tools would be same as what we've had in years past, or especially from March till May. Things like iReady and Screencastify are pieces that kids will still continue to use. We are looking at the potential addition of a learning management system, which would provide for a more rigorous platform to be able to house all the information, to hopefully make communication a little bit easier. And if you have kids that would be in multiple grade levels or multiple schools, the ability to toggle back and forth on the particular kid that you're wanting to look at is there as part of that learning management system that we're looking at. So while things like Google Classroom and Google Meet served us pretty well from March to May, we are considering trying to make that experience better, not only in terms of the platform that we use, but obviously also due to the amount of time that would be expected, obviously, of kids as well, who would be participating in online instruction. What happened from March till May was more kind of a remote emergency learning and trying to train 10,000 kids and 750 teachers to be able to do something that the overwhelming vast majority of them had not done, obviously proved to be some challenging times. But what we do know right now is that the students who are looking to be able to do this and the teachers who are looking to be able to do this, we want to make sure that they have a high quality experience that would be the same curriculum and it would be the same assessments that would be required or that we are offering at Mehlville. And so students also, as you can see there, they do have some choice with the pacing as well. Think of it like a menu style of learning, where instead of having something due every single day, that students more likely may have the opportunity to be able to turn things maybe in on a weekly basis. So that, if they know that Tuesday nights, are a good night for them, or Wednesday nights are a bad night for them, that sometimes that allows them some flexibility to hit things harder at the beginning and maybe, slow things down at the end, or vice versa. So I mentioned, is this different than what was offered from March until May? And the answer is yes. Because of that being remote emergency learning and trying to be able to train 10,000 kids as well as 750 staff members, that presented some challenges. So given the time that we've had, from basically March, April until now, we have been kind of working on this experience and crafting this experience to make it more robust. And so the teachers that will be teaching within the program at the K1, the 2, 3, and the 4, 5 levels will receive some regional and national training on best practices for teaching virtually. We partner with an institute called the Institute for Personalized Learning. We use them for both the work that we've done at Mosaic, as well as the work that we've done in our middle school academies and the MyPath program. And so they have been outstanding partners in providing some really high quality professional development and learning experiences for our teachers. And so when we reached out to them, they have the ability in which to be able to do that. So, our staff will be learning together. Our curriculum team will be learning together, but we will have the support of people who do this regularly and who do this for a living. And so I think that that piece will be very instrumental in ensuring that your kids, for those that are interested, would have a high quality experience online. While it isn't the same as an in-school experience exactly because of things like lunch and recess and sometimes transitions, the content is going to be the same. The curriculum that we're delivering on is the same. The assessment plan is the same. And those pieces of learning and teaching are the pieces I want to make sure we continue to focus on. A typical day, what would it look like? So at this particular point in time, whether it's with Google Meet or another video hosting platform, whether it's probably not Zoom, but there may be some other options that come available that we may explore specifically for our online learning students to make it a more embedded experience. So you're not having to click all over the place, that many things tend to lie within a system. And you will find that many times in what we call this learning management system. And that's the piece that we're looking to be able to potentially adopt for this next year. But to have a mix of both synchronous, which is two-way communication, as well as some asynchronous opportunities where kids will have time to be able to do some of the work that they would have on their own. And then most importantly, be engaged in learning the same materials as what their peers attend and when they're attending school, and we'll call it kind of quote unquote in person. While that new normal might be a little different than what we have historically had. And so going into the last slide or two, another question worth consideration is this: will it be around after COVID-19? So as I told you before COVID-19, we were already planning on having a virtual opportunity for kids, and this accelerated the timeline. What we also know is that we have students who either they themselves or their families, someone in their family is immunocompromised. And so that may very well be a piece for some students to want to continue doing this program. It may continue to be an opportunity for families that just simply say, this is how I feel most comfortable. While not all families may approach it as such, we do want to make sure that we're trying to offer opportunities that provide some voice and choice. And so the choice here is that, you can do 100% virtual. You can do 100% school. And what we would need to potentially work with would be if we have, students and or families that want to be able to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Because there are certainly some classes that are not as easy to replicate. When you think about choir, you think about orchestra, those are some of the classes that are probably harder to replicate online. And so we want to make sure that we can be supportive of every kid's individual needs through the schedule in which we work with them on. We do also know that students, with the educational platforms that we want to make sure that we expose them to are also going to be helpful for them in a long-term perspective. So while you as elementary parents may have, your oldest may be in elementary, and if you don't have middle school kids or high school kids, that's great. But we also are looking at these opportunities at the middle school and high school levels to also potentially promote using of some platforms that kids would also use in a post-secondary setting. Because we want to make sure that kids, when they leave Mehlville, we want to make sure that they've had a quality experience and that things in which they've experienced don't surprise them when they get to whatever post-secondary opportunity in which they want to be able to explore. So the next steps, before we kind of get in this, I want to leave this up for a minute, and whether you want to kind of pull out your cell phone and do the QR code and just kind of have it there on your phone, or if you just want to take a picture of the bit.ly that is there, the web address, bit.ly/Mehlville at home interest. That particular form simply just expresses interest. It is a non-binding agreement. We're just looking to try to nail down some numbers so that way I can plan appropriately. For those that know me, they know that I'm a planner. And one of the things that, because of the quickness of how everything has been kind of having to be dealt with at the state level, at the national level, and even at the local level, I'm a planner. I want to try to make sure that I give your kids a good quality experience. And part of that is just needing to know how to staff it. And staffing is going to be based upon numbers. And so that's going to be an interesting and important piece to have. So if you are part of this call,
You said she was only around for 30 seconds.
so we're going to jump into questions here, but just if you take a look at that, just make sure you take a picture or you take the scan of the QR code. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I want to be able to answer questions. And I know Jessica's been monitoring the chat, and I can see there's probably about 30 or 40 questions that are there, which is great because I knew that whatever presentation we put together was probably not going to answer every single question. So I'm gonna let Jessica moderate these as much as you can. I'm gonna hop into the chat here as well. Jessica, if you want to start from the top, however you want to do it. Some questions may be repeated too. So
absolutely. So here's a question we got from a few parents, and understanding that some of these we may not have the answers to at this point. If you choose to use Mehlville at home for one semester, will you lose your place at Mosaic Elementary School if you're a Mosaic parent?
So to me, the answer to that question would be no, simply because we know that you're kind of taking a little bit of a chance or risk if you want to look at it that particular way. What I do know is that at Mosaic, the studio concept, typically hang on one second. It's two classrooms, like Studio 2 is like 2 classrooms, Studio 3 is 2 classrooms, so on and so forth. And so that usually represents about 50 kids. And so, what I do know that would likely happen is that if we have some kids that would end up going from Mosaic into a virtual opportunity like Mehlville at home, it would then reduce the number of kids at Mosaic a little bit. There might very well be kids who are in some sort of the lottery system or a waiting list system that would come into play. And so the question then becomes, if it's 1 kid or 2 kids, it's a question that we don't know based upon numbers, because numbers will certainly drive this. But if we had 15 kids from, Studio 3 all of a sudden who all wanted to do this together, that Studio 3 classroom would certainly take a little bit of a hit. And so, not to say that kids can't do this, because kids can do this. The Mosaic data with regards to enrollment would simply be a piece that I would work with Dr. Bressler on to ensure that, we continue to maintain what we've built so far at Mosaic.
Some of the other questions we're seeing are about Stretch, the gifted program, and students who have IEPs. How will those be handled at Mehlville at Home?
Sure. So let me start with the IEP question. What we do know is that IEPs are federally protected documents. They give requirements for kids. They give services to kids. So one of the things that we do know is that if we have kids that are going to be accessing this particular program, K through 5, who end up having an IEP, then they would be students who need to make sure that we can get them services as well. So if I, as an example, if I have a reading comprehension or a math calculation disability, you're still eligible for services through your IEP. Some services are harder than others. So if you are a student who is receiving occupational therapy or physical therapy or speech, some of those types of things, some therapies are harder to be able to provide simply due to the virtual nature of things. We would work through situation to situation to ensure that all kids would receive services. Gifted is really in that, kind of in that same realm as well. If kids receive a level of gifted services, then one of the things that we'll need to do is try to ensure that we have a gifted opportunity in which to be able to meet, looking at the number of minutes that would be typically provided to students who qualify. It may not look the same because of the experiences that kids typically get at the elementary. Many times kids are going over to Washington Middle and they are having essentially a full day experience. That may not necessarily be the same case with the Mehlville at Home program. We would have to look at services to try to make sure we could create something so that kids would receive the services in which they need. The most important takeaway there is kids receive services, and we want to make sure, we don't always have an answer to everything yet, but we are working through those pieces. We do know that enrollment will certainly drive that piece as well. Even if we have one kid who needs services, then we need to make sure that we provide services.
Another question is enrollment in Mehlville at Home on a family basis or a student basis? Can some children from the same family do Mehlville at Home while others attend in person?
They certainly could. That is a student-to-student decision. It is not necessarily a family decision as a whole. We do anticipate that the majority of families that are on here will probably do this for all their kids because of the concern that maybe they have. But we're not limiting that at all. If one kid wants to do Mehlville at Home and another kid wants to be able to come to school and have a typical in-person kind of education, both kids have the right to be able to get that.
So this question is, if planning is for clustered grade levels like K to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, does that mean the upper grades will be learning the lower grade content, or will it be personalized so fourth graders learn fourth grade and fifth graders learn fifth?
It would have to be personalized, and I think that that's where that personalized piece also has the potential opportunity to be able to do some acceleration where appropriate. When you look at standards and you look at the grade level expectations from level to level, there are some changes from kindergarten to first grade to second grade to third grade to fourth grade to fifth grade. But when you look at the continuum from kindergarten through fifth grade ELA, or the kindergarten through fifth grade math, or the kindergarten through fifth grade social studies, or kindergarten through fifth grade science, what you will notice is that in some areas, the topics continue to be the same. There's little extra steps that are there. Example of ELA, as you get into the older English language arts, as you get into the older grades, what you will find is that when you start looking at all the standards many times are very similar. There's not a significant change. It's just, we would expect kids to have another year's worth of reading opportunities, another year's worth of writing opportunities. But we know at the kindergarten and the first grade levels how dramatic that learning is from the time that you come into kindergarten to the time you end kindergarten, and from the time you start first grade to the time you end first grade. Learning is pretty dramatic at the youngest of grades. And so as the older kids get, the less I would be worried about that. But the goal is to be able to make sure we create a personalized learning environment for every kid.
Then we're getting some questions sort of about what the day looks like and how many hours can students expect to be engaged in learning.
So I think at this particular point in time, while I don't have an exact hour and minute response to that, I do expect that you would have probably in the range of 4 to 5 hours. When you think about all the things that need to be taught. When you're talking about writing, you're talking about independent practice for writing. You also have to talk about mini lessons for writing. When you're talking about reading, you have to talk about opportunities for read alouds. You have to talk about opportunities to be able to do some level of independent reading for a kid. You also have to do some mini lessons with regards to that. You also have to weave in some phonics that we teach. So when you start breaking everything down, you can start to see how the minutes and the hours can start to stack up. So when I've put together kind of the virtual plan for some things, I can see it fall somewhere in that range of 4 to 5 hours. I might be off a little bit one way or the other, but that's kind of a general ballpark for right now.
And then how flexible would that be? Can families sort of plan some of these activities around their schedules?
So some of the classes obviously would be driven by the person that's delivering content. So if I'm the teacher and I'm delivering that particular content, math maybe at 9, English maybe at 10, science maybe at 11. Some of that's going to be driven by the teacher. Now the work that goes into that, when do you complete the work? Well, that's certainly may be completed outside of that time. It may also be completed during that time. So while it's not exactly like taking a college course where you can choose 3 or 4 different options when someone is teaching that, it is going to be more driven by the schedule of the teacher that we have. And also with, being an employee, we kind of have some general understanding of, there's a start time of school and kind of an end time of school too. So those resources would be available and accessible outside of the school time, but certainly, when I think about, a 4 to 5 hours, and I do see, one of the comments, 4 to 5 hours per day on a laptop for a little kid, that would be, to some extent broken up. I mean, that's where that difference between two-way synchronous, like what we're doing right now, and one way where it's kind of the I teach, we do it together, then you do, and then we come back together. I do know that, for kids that are online, where I knew we were at before was in that 45 minutes to an hour range. But that didn't allow us to be able to get through science. It didn't allow us to be able to get through social studies. It didn't allow us to be able to get through art or for music. And in order to teach the 7 to 8 subjects that we have, in order to do it well, it does take some time.
And I'm jumping around a little bit here, but there's some question as to, being able to switch outside of semester timelines. If a family joins or enrolls their student in Mehlville at home and they don't feel like it's a good fit, can they switch back to a traditional classroom, and also vice versa? If they send their child to the traditional classroom and then start to get nervous, can they switch to Mehlville at home?
So this is one of those where I think I can probably say I don't have the exact answer to that one. And I wish I could say I know exactly how this is going to work. I do understand the concern of a parent on either way. If a parent sends their kid in on the first day and says, ooh, I'm not sure I feel so good about this. Or vice versa, if they start on the online and then they say, oh, I'm not sure I feel so good about this particular one. I do hear that, and I do understand that concern. So, there may be a very short window where we would say, allow the kid to go. What I think we're looking for, though, is to try to ensure that kids, when they start an experience, and that we can plan appropriately from a staffing perspective, that we can do that to the best of our ability so we can provide the best education that we can to kids.
And then what's the expectation between teachers communicating with parents? And if we have different teachers teaching different subjects, is there a homeroom sort of teacher that coordinates assessments and communication? What does that look like?
Sure. So from a content standpoint, the English, the math, the science, and the social studies would all be taught by the same person. That certifications drive these things for teachers. Teachers have certifications for those that maybe don't have the experience. And so, elementary people have certifications many times that are like birth through third grade, or, first grade through sixth grade. So we have to look at certifications sometimes when we're replacing folks. So the one teacher would teach English, math, science, and social studies. It would have a separate teacher for art, a separate teacher for music, and a separate teacher for PE. So I think that would be like 4 teachers total. If that's how it ends up, in terms of communication, I think that the primary homeroom teacher would be the teacher that's teaching the majority of the time. But if there was a question about music or about PE or about art, I would encourage the parent to be able to reach out to that individual teacher. The goal here is to try to make sure that it's a Mehlville teacher. We'll do our best to try to ensure that that's the case. I don't necessarily know at this moment in time how our staffing situation will shake out exactly. But I do know that we've had a number of interviews, and we do have a pool of people who certainly are interested from Mehlville and wanting to be able to do this.
Then there was a question about if anybody could enroll in Mehlville at home. And the answer to that is anybody who's a resident of Mehlville School District can register for that program.
There are other programs, a few other programs in the state that will accept outside district residents. That's not what this program is necessarily intended to be able to do. This program is intended to really be a program that is provided to our district residents only at this particular point in time. We're not looking to expand this above and beyond where we are currently at. We may have more teachers that we add on, and there may be courses that we get added, but we're not looking to take this statewide or nationwide.
And then another question we had was about the instructional tools online. Somebody commented that the technology hurdles during our shutdown in March and April were challenging. And what do these tools look like as opposed to that? And then kind of along the same vein, will iReady be used at Mehlville at home?
So the answer to iReady is yes. That one we will have. That will be a piece that we would have ready for right now, definitely for math, and very likely for ELA as well. Specifically, these, I would have to do some virtual pricing and some things, but iReady should not be a problem. Jessica, what was the other half of that question?
Just what the technology platforms looks like in the virtual program as compared to what some parents experienced during our kind of emergency closure in March and April.
Sure. So from a technology standpoint, one of the things that we would want to strongly encourage is that if a student did not pick up a district-owned device, to be able to have and pick up a district-owned device. While there's nothing wrong with trying to do this on an iPad or trying to do this on a tablet, one of the things that we do know is that when students who are working on a district-owned Chromebook, internet connection aside, that they had easier access to things because of the way that the district has kind of set up the behind the scenes with access and platform. So using a district-owned Chromebook would be strongly encouraged. It also helps us know how much time that a student is spending on some of the things in which they have access to. Whether that's iReady or whether that's Seesaw, kind of 2 of the primary tools that were used in the spring. It allows us the opportunity to kind of gauge that, because sometimes we're not able to see what people's usages are or what students' usage is.
One question, who will oversee the program?
So that's a piece that we're currently working on right now. You know, from an elementary perspective, we know that we do plan on having at least 3 teachers at this particular point in time, plus the potential, obviously, of music, art, and PE, and trying to figure out how to be able to do that. So we're working, that's an answer I can say I don't know exactly right now. It's me. But, you know, I probably will not be the person that's solely doing all this, because we need to make sure that you know, teachers have the opportunity to be able to engage in conversations. We need to make sure that somebody's there to be able to evaluate that progress that's going on as well.
And then I think there might be some confusion about what would happen if we as a district had to shut down and couldn't allow anybody into our buildings, how that would impact Mehlville at Home. So the question was, how seamless would this program be if we had to accept basically a district full of students into Mehlville at Home? So can you talk about the difference between Mehlville at Home and the plans?
Yeah, sure.
What would happen if the whole district went virtual?
So what you've had experience with right now, you know, and what you've heard from the presentation is about Mehlville at Home. If we had to have some level of closure that would impact, you know, all 10,000 of our students that we had from basically March until May, there are some things that would look the same, and certainly there are some things that would look different. Any closure that would come would not be a decision that's made lightly, and likely it would be a decision that would be made countywide. It would probably be a St. Louis County decision, not just a Mehlville decision. Because if Mehlville decided to close down and Hancock Place or Bayless said, oh, we'll remain open, if one school district can remain open, then likelihood is that all school districts can remain open. There may be the potential that, you know, at some point in time, we might have to have a school closed for a couple of days. If we have a case or cases in a particular school, might have to close it down for deep cleaning. You know, during those particular times, and I did see it in the questions, I think somebody had used the words alternative methods of instruction. It's kind of like the virtual snow day. Those are pieces that we haven't got to yet, because we're still kind of about 5 or 6 weeks, well, 7 weeks away, I guess, from school officially opening. I do know that more of these plans will be released kind of around the week of July 20th. And I think you'll see a lot of communication coming from all sorts of types of schools coming around July 20th or so. That's not just our district. That is really kind of, you know, the approach, I think, of many school districts that are going to be out there. So, you know, more information, I think, will follow based around that. But the difference, I think, with when we have to shut down with all 10,000 is that that doesn't stop the learning and the expectations that will be happening with Mehlville at Home. If you're starting, you know, in August, and we want the goal to be able to at least get one semester out of that, and then you can make a decision in late December, early January, as to whether or not you want to continue in for another semester. And people will make those decisions on their own personal needs and interests. So I don't know where we're going to be at in December. I don't know where we'll be at in January. I think there's a lot of speculation with regards to it. I don't know, you know, but I do know that the goal of this is that this is a continuum of learning that will allow for a level of personalization that you may not necessarily see within a typical grade 4. I'm online now, so I'm doing grade 4 online stuff. This allows the opportunity for some of those younger kids to continue to potentially outpace their kindergarten grade level. It also allows the opportunity for our teachers and for our kids to be using things like a learning management system from day one. Whereas when if we have to do that and we have to start back up with 10,000 kids and have things closed down, there will be kind of a little bit of a period where we have to make sure that kids know how to use these pieces. We also have to worry about how does our community provide access to technology. It's the same. We will have some of the same difficulties and same battles that we had from March until May. And I think the community rallied around and did a lot of great things. We have some plans to try to help alleviate some of the technology issues that are there. But some of the most important things that I would say to a family, as long as they had internet access, is that the use of a district Chromebook will help significantly, because then that you have access to everything in one platform. Whereas if you're not using a district Chromebook, it's a little bit scattered and it requires you to go to more places, and that makes it inconvenient and that makes it frustrating. So I understand completely when people were like, I'm ready to throw this device, through the wall. I get it. A lot of us were, but it was also, that was that remote emergency learning. We will be better a second time if there's a second time, and we'll be better a third time if there's a third time. We don't want there to be, but we have to plan as if there will be.
Another question that we probably may not have an answer to this evening, but will students who choose Mehlville at home be able to participate in other in-person activities like after-school activities, Girls on the Run, those sorts of things?
So I don't have an answer for that one exactly, but I also know that the goal would be to provide a student a choice. And if they chose to be able to do online, then a family is making that choice for a reason, and whatever that reason may be. So if it's health, then they may not choose to want to do other outside activities. But if they're choosing it solely out of convenience, or they think it's the best learning style, then there are certainly activities that at the elementary level that kids may want to do. And the goal of a Mehlville at home is not to stop that. It's just to be able to provide an opportunity for learning, so that kids are getting everything that they need, from reading and writing and math and science and social studies and all the other pieces that are required not only from our state, but that we assess from a district level.
And then I'm just going to keep launching questions at you, Dr. Smith, if you're
Cool
with that for a while. So can you talk about placement? Will kids be placed in grade level, or will they be placed at sort of where they're at in learning? So if you have a child who is not yet at grade level, would that child be placed with the age group, or?
So the easy answer to that particular one is by age group. That gets into a whole philosophical conversation for another time, probably, about what do you do with kids, and are grades the best representation? Some kids may be accelerated, some kids may be behind. That's another conversation for probably another time, maybe a different format. But I'm happy to have that conversation. Just this is probably not the right time or the right forum to be able to do that.
And then one concern that was expressed was, will there be someone available to answer students' questions while they're learning material throughout the day?
So yes, the expectation would be that we would have somebody that, we would have the teacher that would be there. So there would be some level of direct instruction. There would be some level of independent learning. Some of that will take place on a screen so that a teacher can kind of check. You have to think about, I've already been inquiring with my administrative assistant about, simple things like whiteboards, and where I can show you my work here. It's as easy as a formative assessment that you could possibly get. You can do that for a lot of different subjects. So, we're looking at a variety of pieces there.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to wrap up this Zoom, and we're going to capture all of your questions, and we're going to give Dr. Smith a little bit of a break before we jump into the middle school Zoom that happens right after this. But feel free, we'll leave this call open just a few minutes. Feel free to put any additional questions you have in the chat, and we'll look at those and create a frequently asked questions document to share. And we'll also share the video from this evening with you all.
Just a quick reminder too, please make sure that if you don't mind, take a moment and just either follow that QR code on your cell phone, or take a picture of the bit.ly. I can share my screen again if you had not done that. It is right here. So please make sure that you do that. I'm sorry. That you take the advantage of that opportunity. We want to make sure that we hear from you, so that way we can plan as well as what we can. We do look forward to launching this program in August with whatever way that it's going to need to look. We'll do our absolute best at trying to make sure that we provide a high quality experience in a format that's probably a little different than what maybe you thought you would be sending your kid back to. But we want to try to make sure we respect a level of choice as well. We look at data. We will follow the information here, and we take this seriously. So thank you. Let me unshare screen and just say last words. So I do want to say thank you for taking the time to be able to participate in this call. Feedback's really important, and I appreciate everything that you're doing to make sure that we do our best, and we want to make sure that we're helping your kids learn in whatever format that may look like. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it.